The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
We are in the Superhuman Academy studio with another one of our amazing guests. Ari is here today to share with us a little bit about his life, the things that he's done, which are pretty amazing. I'm not going to spoil any ahead of time. And we're going to ask him questions, see what he's got for us. Ari, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So first thing, for people who aren't familiar with your work, can you just share a little bit of your background? I've done some reading and I've seen some pretty wild things about curing incurable diseases and reducing work hours to basically nothing. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. Well, I guess the short version is after college, I got into real estate development and I was working on this big project in upstate New York. And after three years or so of doing that, I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And Crohn's is a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the digestive tract, considered to be incurable. And I got very, very sick. And eventually, in relatively short order, I was able to actually overcome it. And even though it is considered incurable, and a big part of that was managing the stress in a sort of systematic way. And my response to that stress issue was to create a new system of productivity, which I called less doing. So basically what happened was I went from working 18 hours a day to barely being able to do an hour of work in a given day. And that extreme restriction on my time resulted in the sort of like compression of a charcoal into a diamond that made me come up with this new system of productivity. So since then, that's developed into several books and teachings and morphed into a bit more of a business-focused methodology, which I call the replaceable founder. Because the goal of what I do is to help make everybody more replaceable, which means creating systems and processes, automations, proper delegation systems, leadership systems, so that people don't become the bottlenecks in their business. And my professional focus at this point is on business coaching, which I do asynchronously over Voxer entirely. So, and then there's a whole bunch of other things. I have 5 small children. I'm a volunteer EMT. Like into woodworking. I'm several boards in our area. So probably a lot of things we'll get into.
Yeah, I remember. So we actually had this call scheduled, I think it was like a month ago. And I
was overly ambitious.
Yeah. The night before, you were up all night doing emergency response work. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. It seems like you've got a lot of good stuff going on. So how do you spend your time now on a given week? What are you doing?
So that's a loaded question. So it varies a little bit. So as I said, I have 5 kids, and ages 11 years to 6 weeks old. And right now they're all in camp, thankfully. So I can get a little bit, well, no, not the baby.
About to say.
Yeah. The coaching work that I do, my work is really limited to about 20 minutes a day. And I know that every time I say that, people think I'm like exaggerating, but I am probably exaggerating. That's probably more than it really is. And because all of my coaching is done asynchronously over Voxer, I don't have any meeting. This call that we're doing right now is the only scheduled call I have today or have had in the last 3 days. Even though I'm individually, privately, one-on-one coaching about 24 founders and entrepreneurs around the world.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Podcasting is one of the few situations where I think synchronous communication is really warranted. So, and I have my own podcast too, so that's usually in there, but we batch that. Additionally, I've just gotten involved in a new sort of online business academy called Princeton Kaizen. I'm based here in Princeton, New Jersey, but somebody here founded this company, and I am the chief methodologist. So a lot of the methods that are being taught are mine, and we're just doing a lot of really, really cool high-end online content around business, growth, leadership, automation, everything. So that's once a week at some point. but that's the work. Other than that, so I am the lieutenant here at the rescue squad in Princeton, and now also the vice president. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, but it's fun for me because I get to do all this streamlining. I'm automating our entire onboarding and recruiting process. I'm on the town's human services commission board for the town of Princeton, so dealing with things like affordable housing and food insecurity and homelessness. I'm on the board of our local Jewish center. My family and I were Jewish, and I am the head of the house committee. So that means that I'm sort of responsible for the entire physical elements of the building and the property that we have. There's probably some more things in there too. Oh, I run all the social media for the Housing Initiatives of Princeton here, which is another nonprofit. I'm involved with the Princeton Community Democratic Organization. And eventually, my sort of long-term goal is I'd like to actually become mayor of Princeton. So all that's going on.
Awesome. So it sounds to me like the less doing is really about doing things efficiently and doing less stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah, it's like the best and worst branding I think I ever came up with. On the one hand, every time I think that I do more than most people that I come across. So it's not about doing less, but at the same time, every time I've always like, oh yeah, my company's called Less Doing. Everyone's like, oh, I need more of that. I'd like to do less. Like, no, that's not exactly. It's just less of the things you don't want to be doing or shouldn't be doing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I think most of our audience, like I have a bunch of questions because I'm an automation engineer by background. So, automation is like, I think in terms of systems. I always think in terms of streamlining, eliminating, that kind of thing. But it sounds like you've taken it, you're at a whole nother level than me. So we got a lot of questions. I know that a lot of our audience, we do have a lot of entrepreneurs in our audience, but we also have a lot of people who are kind of mid-career professionals. Many of them, I'd say maybe even a majority, are in technical or semi-technical roles. So for people who are, let's say, like software engineers, developers, even technical salespeople, do you have solutions for people like that to reduce their workload as well?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, one of the things that I think is always a really important distinction to make when someone asks a question like that is there's these principles need to apply to our personal lives also. And I think that that's harder for people sometimes to think, like, I can't imagine hiring a virtual assistant to help me in my personal life. There's no ROI there. It's like, well, there's probably a greater ROI in many ways, right? And you just don't see it that way. And I've seen that all the time where people just have there's almost like a guilt over using these systems, or they just don't. They're like, oh, this is all work stuff. But then they get a really efficient work setup and they come home to a mess and stress, not a physical one, but like stress and just all sorts of things and bills to pay and all that kind of, standard stuff. So for the people who truly have like no flexibility in their work life, getting your home life more efficient is extremely valuable and something that people need to focus on. And these principles apply there as well. So like I use Trello as my project management tool of choice. Doesn't have to be Trello. You can do stuff with other tools. I personally think that the Kanban layout of project management is the best one. And there are other ways to do that than Trello, but I happen to really like Trello. So I use Trello at home. I use Voxer with my wife and my family. So it's actually a really great way for us to be able to communicate and be able to not forget things or go back and look at things that were used that way. And then there have been many, many, many weeks where I have used virtual assistants for home stuff more than I have in business stuff. Not everybody has, 5 kids, obviously, but when you have to fill out camp forms for 4 children, it's nice to be able to have a VA do that and have them spend the 3 hours that it took rather than me. Right. And including like coordinated doctor's documents, all that kind of stuff. But other than that, the number in the business sense, I think the number one thing, again, to me is asynchronous communication. I can't stress that enough. There are far too many communications happening that, so there's 2 levels of this. One, there's far too much communication happening and far too many meetings happening that are done synchronously that should be done asynchronously. And let me just say the reason that asynchronous is so valuable is because essentially what you're telling people is that you can communicate when you're at your best, and I can do the same, right? So in the coaching setting, I'm sorry, this is like a long way of answering the question, but I think it's important context. So in the coaching setting, like I said, I used to have traditional coaching model. I'd meet with people once a week for an hour, and they could email me in between. And that, first of all, that limits the amount of clients that I can see in a given week. Everybody is sort of has different circadian rhythms. They're at their best and worst at different times. Plus, is it better for somebody to have an issue on a Friday, seethe about it until our meeting on Wednesday at noon, and then spend 45 minutes to get the 3-minute answer that they need, right? Or the opposite, asynchronous. Do it when you want, when you need it, and then the other person can listen and respond when they want to. So it's not just a more convenient; it's actually a more effective way of communicating. But I do my sales that way as well. So if people want to become a coaching client of mine, they can go to voxwithari.com, which is a YouTube video that just explains what Voxer is and how it works, and then we can start talking on Voxer. And if they don't like that, then they're not going to be a good coaching client for me, right? So I've found that, and the part of the point of what I'm sharing here is that you have to sort of push the envelope of what people might traditionally think would not be okay asynchronously, right? A lot of people are just going to assume like you've got to get on a call or in a meeting to close the big deal. But I sell pretty high ticket coaching, and typically instead of having a 45-minute sales call, now there's 7 minutes of exchange audio over the course of 20 hours on Voxer, and I get the same result. So pushing more and more of what you do to asynchronous, and now that's the first level I was talking about. That's like the high level obvious aspect. The more subtle part of that is that a lot of the communication that we already engage in that really should be and is asynchronous is not treated as such. So email is a really good example. Most people do not use email correctly. Most organizations do not use email correctly, as far as I'm concerned. But at the very least, how many people have you seen who have multiple computer screens and one of them is always email, right? That's just like the typical, that's the way. That like negates the asynchronous aspect of it, because essentially what you're doing is creating a to-do list that other people fill for you.
Yeah.
all the time, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, I'm going to check my email right now for the next 10 minutes. That's going to be my focus for 10 minutes. I'm going to answer, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to close it, and I'll come back to it after. But that requires a whole sort of systemic approach to how you communicate, where you communicate, creating intentionality around that. And emails, like a whole other conversation we get into. But so asynchronous communication is the big one. And then the second really, really big one is transparency and project management. Software engineers particularly, I mean, they're using Jira, they're using all sorts of different tools where they can track these things really well. But again, a lot of times in many, I'd say most companies that I interact with, there's no system in place. There's no design to how we actually use those systems. It's just like, yeah, this is the tool we use. Put your stuff in there. So some of that might sound really obvious, but I just see it 99 times out of 100 that companies and individuals don't utilize the systems that they have the way that they can.
Got it. So I want to make this super practical for myself and also for our audience. Would you be willing to kind of coach me on this call, and people can be a fly on the wall?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
My favorite thing.
Yeah. So how do you typically start a coaching arrangement like that?
You mean like the logistics of it, or was just
or a coaching call? Like how would you put things off?
So keep in mind, this is not, I don't do calls.
Right. Exactly.
So I start off with a framework that I created called the ultimate KPI.
Okay.
So what that is it's a fairly simple framework, but it's really powerful. So you look at, it's just a worksheet. Anybody listening can just do this themselves. You make a list of about 20 things that you do on a regular basis. And you can be kind of as micro or as macro as you want. So maybe for you would say at a macro level, podcasting. But maybe what you want to break that down and say, being on podcast versus interviewing people on podcasts, right? So you really just the 20 things that take the most of your time on a regular basis. Yeah, or the most of your energy is another way to look at it too. Now we look at that list of 20, and then we want to identify which of one of four mindsets those fall into, and those are something that I teach. I'll try to make this part as quick as possible because there's a whole explanation behind it. But there's cog, engine, engineer, and inventor. right? And so these are mindsets. So anybody doing any kind of job can exist at any one of these. And it's really sort of looking along the axes of focus, freedom, and flexibility. Inventor, someone who's an inventor, basically they can focus on what they are the best at, where they can have the most impact, where they bring the most joy. They have the flexibility to work anytime, anywhere, anyhow, and they have the freedom ultimately to leave the business if they choose to. The cog, which is all the way at the bottom, they're caged. There's no flexibility at all. In terms of freedom, they're overwhelmed, and in terms of focus, they're really focused on the minutia. They're just trying to like grinding and getting it done. And then there's two levels in between. So that's that for somebody who's just listening to this and not actually working with me. You don't have to worry about the mindset part, but that would be the next step. So we take those 20 things, and then the second part is we want to take 16 of those things that in 1 year's time you will no longer be doing at all anymore.
All right.
So it's 80-20 basically, and that is what growth looks like, right? In order to take on new stuff and grow, we need to be able to shed old stuff and discard, basically. But it forces you to put this into a framework. And the reason that I created this, by the way, is because I've worked with so many different founders and entrepreneurs in so many different industries that it's always been hard, honestly, from a sales point, for me to tell people what the result is that I'm going to give them in a standardized way, right? Because I've had people quit their jobs and start new companies. I've had companies, grow from Fortune 500 to Fortune 200. I've had companies increase. It was just always a challenge for me to be like, hey, I'm Ari Meisel. Like, I'm going to help you, hit six figures and whatever. So the ultimate KPI became a sort of general way of tracking people's progress towards replaceability. So the 16 things, once you have that list, now we come up with a plan for each one. And the plan follows my optimize, automate, outsource framework, which is the very original Less Doing framework. Yeah. So you take an item, and I see that it seems like you're writing some down, so we can talk about specifics. Yeah. So give me one, for example, that you would not do anymore.
Copywriting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so copywriting. So now, are we going to optimize it, automate it, or outsource it? What do you think? Optimizing would be going to just make it a much more efficient process, so that either it doesn't exist anymore, like it's we efficiency it out of a need, which doesn't sound like that's going to happen here. We probably could automate it to some extent now that we have tools to do that, and right. Maybe and it's not just one, by the way, it can be a combination of them. Yeah. But anyway, so that would be the next column. This is the plan of how we're going to actually do it.
Right.
And then we just use that tool over time, that framework, to track our progress. So, if I have a client that in a month we look at their sheet and they've gotten 5 things off their list after a month, like, that's awesome. They're killing it. If they've gotten 1, then maybe we need to look at something. And why I call it the ultimate KPI is because I've used this now to apply. I can apply this to a salesperson, a receptionist, a CEO, a CFO, you name it. Like, this framework will apply because everybody in the business should be moving towards replaceability. Because if you can't be replaced, you cannot be promoted. Right? Think about it that way.
Let's see.
So,
with copywriting, like, I would pick probably automating, especially with the AI tools available right now. So that would be my first instinct.
Yeah.
Do you make recommendations about specific tools, or do you leave that up to your coachees?
Absolutely. So I generally try my best to be tool agnostic, because technology amplifies habits, right? It'll make them better, or it'll make them worse. But it's more about sort of how the setup is. I'm a big, in general, like, I'm a pretty big Zapier user. I know they're Integromat, there's other platforms, and I'm familiar with how to use them, but I lean in pretty hard to Zapier. And I probably every week I'm building 1 or 2 news apps for one of the things that I'm working on or something. So for copywriting, it's not necessarily that there's a specific tool, right? I would probably build something with Zapier and ChatGPT, and like, you can do that pretty effectively, including doing like QA. You can run it through sort of a rinse and repeat process. Something like that. But there's also Jasper. There's Magic Copy. There's so many different copywriting tools out there. But yeah, so that would be like, that's a perfect one. That I'm going to say, Collin, like, in a year, this has got to be off your list. So now it's part of a hit list. a lot of the things that you write on your list or that anybody write on the list are going to be really obvious to you. Like, yeah, I just need to hire a VA to do this thing, or I just need to set up that tool. But then there's going to be ones on the list where it's like 16 is tough out of 20. And there's going to be ones where you're like, there's no way I could ever replace myself or have somebody else do this. And those are the ones I really like to dig into.
Well, what are some of those that you've seen frequently? Things that people just don't expect that they can automate or delegate, and then you're able to.
You know how often copywriting comes up? Do you know how many?
I'm sure copywriting comes up all the time.
but do you know how many? I mean, I'm sure you do. But do you know how many entrepreneurs think that they are just the best fucking copywriters that ever graced the face of the earth, and nobody could possibly do it as well as them?
I know that's
like, are you kidding me? Yeah, it's like you are not even in the bottom 10th of the bottom 1% of copywriters, but nobody could do it the way you do it. And the best one is,
what are some things that, like, you know, a lot of our audience members probably just wouldn't even think of that they do on a regular basis that they could be getting rid of.
Well, so here's a good way of thinking about ChatGPT and as an answer to that question,
Okay.
right? So many people think about ChatGPT. Well, there's a crowd of people that are like, it's going to replace our jobs, it's going to take over the world. Like, you know, the people that say that are very well may actually, but that's not. We're so not even close to that at this point with what ChatGPT can do, even though it is amazing. The way that I like to think about ChatGPT is as a time saver, pure and simple. It's a time saver, right? So like I run social media for these two different organizations. I don't really have, I wouldn't consider myself a great social media expert. But what I'm doing with ChatGPT is 1,000 times better than what they were doing before. And the only reason I can do it for these organizations is because I use ChatGPT to write most of the copy and to, you know, but I'm still involved in the process. So it's not really replacing anything. It's just speeding the process up. So the reason I'm using that to answer your question is that there's a lot of people look at outsourcing and replaceability as a very binary activity, meaning like I have to do everything or someone else has to do everything. And they're not really comfortable necessarily with either one, but there are so many levels in between, right? It's like, yeah, sure. And I see this a lot of times with older entrepreneurs where it's like, they've been doing this business for 50 years. Nobody could possibly replace what they do. And it's like, well, first of all, has anyone ever tried? Probably no. But also we don't have to like completely replace them tomorrow. Like, let's just start like trying to pull the process out of them a little bit. It's so funny how you're asking what the most common ones are. It's interesting how like reading and writing seems to be like some of the most common ones. So I had a person come to me who was part of a law firm with 6 partners, and then the senior partner was this guy's father, and I think they were doing like trusts and estates. And the way that they were set up is that all these 6 lawyers, every time they did a document, it had to go through the father, to review it before it would go out to a client. And the guy would make changes and things like that. And I'm like, well, have you ever come up with a process for how your dad reviews these documents? He's like, oh yeah, you know, we submit it here and he reads. I was like, no. Like the way he actually reviews them. And he's like, no, what do you mean? I was like, why don't you watch him correct a document sometime and ask him to explain why he makes a change and then codify that basically. Right. And this was like, I want to say this was like 5 years ago. So there was a tool called Monkey Learn, which was one of the early machine learning consumer models that came out. That was really, really great, where you could show it, you know, this is what X looks like, and it would learn from that. Within like 6 months, we created a machine learning model that was replacing this guy's, you know, 30, 40 years of experience. So a lot of this is really just a mental blockage. So sales is another one too, by the way. Nobody could possibly sell the way I sell. Okay, well, then, you know, you're going to be very limited in what you do. You know, nobody could capture my voice. Like, do they need to? You know, there's just all these elements that are really. It's not a technical or an automation or anything. It's really just a mental blockage of people ascribing their value in an organization to the wrong thing.
All right. So the first thing we've got, you know, write down 20 things you do on a regular basis. Pick 16 of those that we're going to optimize, automate, outsource, or some combination of those three. What's the next step? You said make a plan for how you're going to do that for each of the 16, or do you just start with one?
No, ideally we go through each of the 16 because some of those are going to be things you could probably do today.
Sure.
Like some of them are going to, but just seeing it that way, I'm assuming you didn't write.
I got 8
yet, right?
8
So,
down.
yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. I have people who are like, they get to like 16 or the initial 16. They're like, I don't know 4 more things. Like you're not that busy, I guess. You think you're really busy, but I guess you're not. And then there's 16 are really hard because they'll get to like 10, no problem. And then the last 6, it's like, no, I couldn't get that off my plate. No, I couldn't get off my plate. So we would then, if we were coaching on Voxer, I talk to most of my clients every single day, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. And it runs the gamut of, this is what I did today, and this is where this happened, and I need help with this, to just venting sometimes. There's so much psychology that goes into what makes us an effective or ineffective operator that just needs to come out and sort of work through. So we'd kind of just jump in at that point.
Yeah, I've seen in my coaching work over and over and over again that one of the main reasons why people do busy work or things that they will say that they don't enjoy doing is because it gives them a sense of feeling needed, feeling important. And once you're moved, they're actually afraid of free time. They say that they want, like, oh, I just wish I had more time to do it, sit around. I don't know. I want more free time, but they're actually afraid of it. They don't really want extra time because they don't know what they would do with it. So I've definitely seen that a lot. There is just a huge psychological component to this. But all right, so I've got a list of 8 things here. They're kind of big picture. I'm sure we could break them down quite a bit. But let's go with house chores, because I'm kind of curious what your approach with that is, and I'm sure everybody listening to this will have their list of chores. Is that something you typically talk through, automating, outsourcing, or optimizing?
Absolutely. So I mean, Amazon Subscribe and Save is your best friend, first of all.
Yeah. Okay.
It's because there's so much. We want to try to avoid decision making wherever possible, right? And if something can just come to you rather than you having to call for it, that's usually a pretty good thing. Plus, that serves as a prompt, right? And the famous example that I always used to give I've given it for 10 years now, is like every 6 months we get a delivery of 9-volt batteries, to change the smoke detector batteries. So I don't wait until it starts beeping at 3 a.m. I change them every 6 months, right? But I don't have a reminder every 6 months to order the batteries to then do it. They just show up, and the box says like, oh, okay, time to do that. We have the Amazon ALEXA devices in every house, in every room of the house, pretty much. I can't say it because
I guess
we're doing stuff. And my wife for Father's Day got me the sunglasses, which is awesome. So now I have it all the time. Everything in our house is automated. The lights, the sound, the temperature, the pool, my Tesla. I can open my Tesla or any part of the Tesla from my glasses, now my glasses from the house. Reminders. I can create Trello cards with it now because of automation there. So the external brain is a big part of that, right? I never want to be like walking through the house with the baby in my arms, be like, oh, we need to get this thing. It's like, no, Alexa, do this, add this to the list, do the thing, and just get it out in this sort of constant flow. The brain is really bad at holding on to information. So that's one thing I think is really important. Plus, if we don't have a maid, we don't have a babysitter. My wife and I, we do it all here. So if I'm sweeping the floor, I'd like to be able to just say to the devices anything from, hey, we need to order more Swiffer pads, to make a note to tell this client about this thing that I just thought of, right? And all of that just goes into Trello. Everything goes into Trello for me.
Okay.
So constant capture is really important. Idea capture can happen all day long. And then once a day, pretty much, I'll go into Trello more than once a day, but I have this sort of routine at the end of the night where I'll sort all those ideas, because at the end of the day, I'll go into Trello and I might have 7 or 8 cards that were created through automations. And the sorting mind is very different than the idea capture brain.
Right.
And that's really important because especially with entrepreneurs, what you see a lot of times is, oh, I got an idea. And then 3 hours later, it's like, what did I do the last 3 hours?
Yeah.
Because it's like the shiny object thing. So getting in that mode of like capture. And then I know that at the end of the day, I'm going to sort all this stuff. And the sorting is really powerful because now at the end of the day, I have 8 things, let's say. One of them is something, I saw this camp that I want to sign the kids up for. So I'm going to talk to my wife about it. This is something that I wanted to order. I saw this cool gadget, send that off to a VA or, assign it to a VA. This is something that I think would be a really cool marketing push for the company. So I'm going to assign this to my COO, and then it's like boom, boom, boom. And now things get put into motion.
So you do the assigning when you're sorting. So at the end of the day, you're assigning tasks to different
That's
people
sorting. That's what I mean by sorting.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, of course, throughout the day, I have Trello on my phone. I'm going to be in Trello. There'll be other things, but also just sort of knowing that I have that dedicated time to process the ideas of the day is really powerful.
So when you assign things to yourself, do you use a calendar tool? What does that look like? Or is it all just in Trello with dates?
It's all in Trello with due dates on it. So I think one of the nice features in Trello is that, first of all, is color coding. So if the due date is within 24 hours, it turns yellow, and if it's overdue, it turns red. But also I'll get pop-up notifications. So and so is due it a day. This is that, and that's also the way that I'm able to keep track of all the different things because I have a board. Pretty much, well, if I'm working with other people, I have a board for each of these different organizations that I'm involved in.
Yeah.
So, because oddly, and well, not oddly, but it's sort of funny. A lot of the things that I have to deal with the Jewish Center as the house chair is kind of similar to things I have to deal with in our own house. So if I had those in one place, it would get very confusing. But so I have separate Trello boards, and it's just very, very manageable, and very organized. And it might sound to some people like that would be overwhelming because now there's all this information stuff, but it's the difference. You ever see the movie Bruce Almighty?
Yeah.
Right. So remember when he's hearing all the prayers and then he eventually turns it into email?
Post-it notes and emails.
Post-it notes and then email, right?
Yeah.
It's the difference between actually, you know what, even a better example is polarization, right? So like instead of things going all different ways, you just bring it all into this sort of one nice little channel that you control.
So do you mentioned notifications throughout your day? Are you constantly being told by your Trello board what to do? Is that how it works? Like you're just saying, oh, okay, what's the next thing? It pops up, do that.
Oftentimes, yeah. And it's not, I'm being, when I set those up, I know, so peak time and timing throughout the day is a whole other sort of topic that I get into a lot of times with people. But so I'm assigning things at times that I'm being intentional about. It's not just tomorrow morning at 8:15 and then I get 50 notifications at 8:15 in the morning. That's not what I do. But yes, generally, that's how I do it. And to that extent, also Google Calendar, like if it's not in the calendar, it's not in Trello, it doesn't exist in my world. I have 23 different calendars syncing into Google Calendar at all times. Yeah. And it's great because I have my calendar, my wife's calendar, the kids' calendar, and then I have the Jewish Center calendar, the rescue, all of my shifts at the ambulance squad. They're all like everything's in there. So nothing ever gets missed and nothing ever gets overscheduled. Like it's my source of truth.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I don't have 23. I probably have like 6 or 7, but whenever I show people my calendar, I think they have a heart attack. There's lots of colors going on. Me too. To me, you get used to your own systems, but yeah. Okay, so to me, it sounds like I'm trying to like kind of visualize what it looks like throughout the day for you, and it sounds like as you're having ideas, you're thinking through things. You use your voice a lot, so you're saying device, essentially make a Trello card for this. Mm-hmm. And then you don't think about it anymore until you get back to the end of the day.
Exactly. And that's a key. But there's a dozen ways so like there's a really great app, Whisper Memos, which is it's with Whisper.ai, I think, but it's Whisper Memos. And it's great. You just record and it sends it immediately to be transcribed. It's very accurate. And then it sends you back an email with the transcription. So one of the reasons I particularly like it is that it actually has a lock. You can't see it. It's got a lock screen widget on the iPhone. So I can just hit that right on the lock screen and start recording. So that's a really nice touch. Second of all, what I did, of course, is that when the email comes in now, I created a rule so that it doesn't even hit my inbox. It gets sent to Zapier. It gets sent to Zapier to create a Trello card. But it doesn't just get sent to Zapier to create a Trello card. It gets sent to Zapier to take it to ChatGPT to say, clean this up, flesh it out, and then make a Trello card. Additionally, if in the message I say this should be assigned to Courtney, it will know through ChatGPT, it will know to at her username and put that into Trello. And so then it can go right to her. Usually I'm going to do the assigning manually just because I think it's an important part of the process for me, just to keep awareness of what's going on. But I can do that. It's because, if so I'm planning to do, there's a thing called Stop the Bleed training, which is, active shooter training stuff with tourniquets and things. That's a standard. It's almost becoming a standard as like CPR training. And I'm an instructor and I'm going to be teaching that at our local school system. So the message I literally was like, talk to Principal Ramirez about Stop the Bleed training. That was all I said. And the Trello card that came out was like, step 1, contact Mr. Ramirez. 2, discuss the Stop the Bleed training and why it's valuable for the schools. And here's 3 points of like how, and it like completely fleshed it out. And that was what was on the Trello card.
So I'm guessing there you probably have a somewhat sophisticated ChatGPT prompt that guides how it writes those things. Well, that's something you're willing to share. I'd be interested to hear what that sounds like.
Yeah, I will, and I will say this: I'm fortunate, and I guess other people can benefit from this too. But ChatGPT is actually familiar with my work, so you can say, so I can say like, flesh this out in terms of these 6 levels of delegation as taught by Ari Meisel. Like I can say that.
Well, so other people could use that too. They could reference the work. That would be interesting.
But most people wouldn't even have to take it that far. Honestly, you can certainly do that. But I mean, I'll get it. Actually, I'll get you the.
Oh, I'd love to hear the prompt.
Yeah, it's so this is funny. What I've been really enjoying with ChatGPT also is that where is it? There it is. It's I'll work through it to refine the prompt, and then when I'm done, I'll say now rewrite the prompt so it's like really succinct.
I do that too.
Yeah. So it was. The initial one was the following transcript is from a voice memo I did on my phone. I want to turn this into a Trello card. Please clean it up and expand upon it a little to the best of your ability. If I mention assigning to someone, then denote an assignee based on the following Trello usernames. And then so let me see.
That's pretty simple. I was expecting.
That's what I initially wrote. So So what I ended up with is, when processing my voice memos into Trello cards, please distill the key points, clarify any ambiguities, and expand on details to provide a full context. This should include a clear title, a comprehensive description, and a task list to guide the workflow. In case I mention assigning the task to a specific person, include the relevant Trello username so it can be properly assigned via Zapier. Do not add a due date or labels unless I explicitly request them in my voice memo. Please maintain the tone and focus of my voice memo while providing necessary enhancements to ensure the task efficiency. And that's been good. So
that's pretty simple. All right, cool.
Yeah, and that's perfect. So, I was trying to see if it could. Yeah, so like for the Stop the Bleed one, it said. Remember, so all I said was talk to Principal Ramirez about Stop the Bleed training. It says the title, Outreach to Principal Ramirez regarding Stop the Bleed initiative. Description, the task is to initiate a conversation with Principal Ramirez to discuss the Stop the Bleed initiative. The primary objective is to delve into the school's existing protocols related to this program, offer our expert insights, and discuss potential enhancements if required. The details procured from this call will assist in developing strategies for ensuring student safety and proficient emergency response mechanisms. And then it goes into a 7-step task list. So I mean, like that's from a 9-word audio message.
No, that's pretty impressive. You mentioned how ChatGPT knows who you are, knows your system. So how have you leveraged that? Do you have any prompts that reference your work where it splits things up in a certain way?
Yeah. So it's funny. So it's, I guess, their cutoff is 2021. So it doesn't know the ultimate KPI. It does know the 6 level delegation and things like that. So there was a 6 levels of delegation form that I created, and I could have it put a task into that form. You also can create a bot with it, basically say like, ask me the questions necessary to complete a 6 level delegation form from Ari Meisel's system, replaceable founder.
Okay, cool. What are the 6 levels? Did I miss those?
No, we didn't talk about that. That's a whole other topic. So the 6 levels is basically, as I said, people see outsourcing as like a very binary activity. Like I have to do it all, or they have to do it all, and that's really not the way it should be. So I created this concept of 6 levels of delegation, and it's not that it's not that levels that like level 1 is better than level 2 or 3. It's just what is appropriate for you, for the task at hand, for the person that you're actually giving it to, all those different things. And what might be level 1 for me could very well be level 4 for you. So the levels are perform, investigate, recommend, conclude, decide, and achieve. And so what that really looks like is level 1 is just do what I say, right? Like I'm really not looking for your opinion on this. Just
okay. I see what this,
And if you think about this in terms of VAs, think about this in terms of project, like anything. We've all had the experience of outsourcing something and getting a poor result, right? And so if I tell you, Collin, if you're my VA and I'm like, I want this, this productivity book on Amazon. I want less doing on Amazon, right? And I'm saying this is level 1, right? That means, Collin, go to Amazon, just buy the less doing book. I don't want to hear it. That's it. Just do it. But if that's level 5 and you go on there and so level 5 is decide, which means explore and decide within these limits. This is one of my favorite ones. Level 5 is where you're saying like, hey, if it's a $500 decision or less, like I don't need to know about it. You do you. Okay. If it's something that's going to take the team less than 2 hours, you do it. I don't need to know. Nobody needs to know about it. Just do it. So same task, right? Hey, Collin, I want the less doing book on productivity. Level 5. You get out, you go and look for it, and it's not available anymore. And now you, Collin, have the initiative to be like, well, I think that Ari wants to get more productive, right? So I'm going to look for like an alternative that I think makes sense for this, and then buy that, and it's less than $500, right? So level 2 is investigate, which is really like look into the options, come back to me, and like I'll take it from there. Level 3 is recommend, which is where what you're doing with these levels is you're starting to dial up the level of empowerment and let go of a little bit of control. So level 3 is go look into this and come back to me, and you tell me what you think we should do. So this is really the first part where we're starting to allow for some empowerment. But I'm still going to make the decision, but like, I'm involving you in that decision. Level 4 is conclude. So this is decide and inform me. So this is where I'm going to say like, I want this book on productivity. You're going to buy something else. And you're just going to say, hey, the thing that you wanted wasn't available. I got you this. Great. That was level 4. Level 5 is decide within these limits. That's again, if it's less than $500, like the book just shows up. And if I'm like, hey, Collin, why isn't this less doing book? You're like, because this wasn't available. This is better. I bought it. And level 6 is achieve, meaning just get it done, right? So we go from level 1, which is do what I say, to level 6, which is just get it done, where level 6 is an interesting flip, or I actually like sort of leap off of a cliff, because at that point, not only are you saying like, I don't care who you have to kill or talk to or pay, like you just get it done. But what you're really saying is, I recognize that at this point, my involvement in the process will only hinder it. And I'm going to step back and let you do what you do best. Now, typically, you'll see that in something where you're hiring maybe a programmer or an architect, or, if I hire a graphic designer and they're going to come back to me like, which font do you want? I'll be like, I'm doing right now is slowing you down. Yeah. Right. Like level. So, but the really important thing here is that what you're doing is you're empowering people, because you're giving them the freedom to know that they have a certain amount of autonomy and decision making, that if something doesn't go well anymore, like it's on you as the assignee, as the leader.
So how is that? How are the KPIs? I don't know. Is that what we were talking about before? Was it you said ultimate KPI? Is that what it was called?
Yeah. Um, so one way of getting rid of these things in your list, right, is to outsource them. That's one of the ways. And outsourcing is not simply just like, hey, let me find somebody on Upwork and give this to them. There's a lot more nuance to how we do that.
The ultimate KPIs, that's newer, and that is how you
right.
measure
So that's
progress.
how we measure the progress towards replaceability.
And is it just the 16 we talked about with making the plans? And
Correct.
okay, got it. Is there anything more to that I should know if I'm going to try to do this, which I am?
No. And again, if we were coaching, then there's going to be ones where you're like, I don't know how I can get this off my plate. I know I want to and I should, but I don't know how. And then that's what we would work through together.
I'm guessing with calls, you've already talked about this. So I would use Loom. I haven't used Voxer before, so I'm not sure if it's similar. Is basically just recording responses to things?
Yeah. So Voxer is primarily a voice communication tool, and you think about it like, you remember the old Nextels with the chirp chirp? You know, no. How old are you?
Apparently too young. 26.
Okay. Okay. Well, back in the day, we used to have phones that you could do push to talk on. They were very popular with construction people. But okay, so think about like WhatsApp voice messages, or even iMessage voice messages.
Sure.
iMessage, I think, is the worst one because they just, the voice messaging sucks on it. And if you miss, you stop holding it, like you lose the whole message, the whole thing. But think about it that way. So you can text, you can send pictures and stuff in Voxer, but it's primarily voice. And the thing that it has that's unique over all the other platforms, because they have several patents on this, with WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram, any of them, you hold the button, you record a 10-minute message, it uploads, the person on the other end downloads it, they listen, and go back and forth. With Voxer, within 0.2 seconds of me hitting the talk button, the person on the other end can begin to listen.
Okay.
If they're there, right? If they're not, they just listen to it later. So it's both synchronous and asynchronous, and it just really changes the flow, because I'll have times where we just happen to catch each other, a client and mine, and we can go back and forth like a phone call for 15-20 minutes, and then I get out of my car or they get in an elevator, and like there's, and then I answer them 10 minutes later, and then I go to dinner, and the conversation continues the next day. And it just feels very, very fluid that way. So it's not Loom like voice, videos back and forth. It's really primarily voice. And as a coach, voice is really valuable for me because I just can hear so much more in terms of intonation and emotion, cadence and everything.
Got it. Okay, very cool. Let's see. I'm looking at the other things on my list. What about with so a lot of my work is actually already the task of project management or delegation.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you go about outsource? It feels kind of meta to outsource the process of project management or delegation.
Well, and so how are you doing it right now? What kind of system do you use?
I've used various ones. I've used Trello quite a bit in the past. I haven't used that as much recently. I've used Monday. I've used Asana. Those are some of the tools. But
I don't like Asana. I don't like Monday. But again, the tool doesn't matter. You can make it work in the tool.
Sure.
The key again is the Kanban way of doing it. So a lot of people don't set up Trello up the right way. So there's a few different answers I give you here, but let's talk about an optimization, right? So using Trello better, right? If you were using Trello, right? So like we set it up in a better way. We set up so there's several things I have for project management setups. One is the Kanban view. Second is that you know how in Trello and a lot of them you can have members on cards and you see the little faces pop up on the card. Bad idea. There should always only be one member on any card.
Okay.
One owner.
Yeah.
Really key.
So that way it doesn't get like it just sits there and they're like, oh, I thought you were doing it. I thought you were doing it. Is that the main reason?
Exactly. Because you as the grand project manager need to be able to say like, this card is late. John owns that card. I'm going to talk to John. Right? It creates accountability and transparency, not for the purposes of getting people in trouble, but actually for the purposes of creating opportunities for people to help each other. And you as the owner, top guy, whatever, to be able to know where to focus your resources at a given time. Right? Where is the boat leaking the most kind of thing.
And I just realized that some of our audience may not know what Kanban is. So just for those who don't know, it's basically you can use cards, but moving them from one stage to the next. It's used in manufacturing a lot. Basically, when one thing is empty, it indicates to the person who needs to refill it that it needs to be refilled.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. So it's essentially like lists, parallel lists that represent phases in a process. So the easiest way to think about this is to do, doing, done. Right. That's the way I set it up for most people. You can have many more categories in there, but it's still this sort of arc of to do, doing, done. So it's dynamic, so you can move cards from one phase to another. You could do this without technology at all, by the way. You can use a whiteboard with lines on it and Post-it notes that you move from one to the other. That movement is very important. And having a done list is also really important because there's sort of a psychological effect of that completion that goes there. But the other thing, too, is that we don't then want to use a communication tool like Slack or Teams or email, God forbid, to communicate about those projects because we have a project management sphere to do that. And that's where the communication needs to take place and needs to stay. So you can have 100 tasks going on and 100 conversations, but they're all very micro and very contextual. And it makes it a lot more manageable. So you can, like what you need to do when. So that would be a way to optimize that. There's a number of automations that we can put into this stuff as well in terms of, if somebody doesn't complete it, they get a reminder. That's a pretty obvious basic one, right? But like, we can now use ChatGPT to break down tasks further for people. There's actually a really interesting, it's a very, very simple tool. It's called goblin.tools. I don't use this professionally, but it is an interesting idea. It was really specifically designed for people with like ADHD. But one of the things you do is you can put a task in and then have it break it down. So if you wrote clean the kitchen, it'll break that into 15 tasks, like take out the trash, clean all the surfaces, which is really great for somebody who's already making too many decisions. Just like, okay, I'm going to do that one now. Okay, now I'll do that one. Like, it's okay to sort of like treat yourself like an idiot sometimes and just do what you're told.
Sure. Yeah. Basically make yourself a level one to yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you avoid getting caught up? Because I'm sure you said you've got lots of different boards. There's going to be lots of different tasks on those boards that you're managing, lots of micro conversations. How do you not end up just responding, like going through card after card after card, sending little micro responses? Because that could end up taking a lot of time.
I mean, I think I'm pretty quick about it. I think the big thing for that one is that I like to push clients to do this as well when they can, but one of my very first sort of productivity experiments back in 2014, I want to say, when really we were very, very limited in our options for automation or anything like that, was I wanted to be able to do everything in my life and business from my phone. Not just because it makes me more mobile, but because if you can do it efficiently from your phone, then when you do get to a computer or a bigger device, something, you're now like superpowered essentially. And it was hard at the time. I was able to work it out with some workarounds, but now it's so easy. I can do literally everything from my phone. In fact, the computer that I'm sitting at right now is my 11-year-old son's gaming machine. I don't have a computer at home. I don't have a laptop.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can see the gaming chair, like seriously. So, all the Trello, so I can do Trello with one hand while I'm walking the dog, and like it, and this is another thing too, is that, all the productivity people will tell you that I check my email twice a day or once a week or whatever it is. I check my email like 30 or 40 times a day. And that seems crazy to some people, but it's like, it takes me seconds. And what I end up doing is I'm not holding other people up. I think people miss out on the value of not holding other people up, especially if you're the leader in your business. Because then then you get to be the first domino instead of the bottleneck. Right. So if I'm able to jump in and in 15 seconds, if I answer 10 Trello cards with a little comment, somebody else can continue doing what they're doing. If I don't, and I'm able to, then that hour delay that I might have for them could end up in like a 2-week butterfly effect delay for the whole team. And it really happens that way.
Do you have your own rules for yourself on how you go about responding to things? Because like, I think one thing I get stuck in is sometimes I respond too much, like not just like I'm sending too many messages, but I'll write like 6 paragraphs.
Yeah.
When I really should have probably just had a rule of like, all right, here's how I format my responses so that I can get things across in a sentence instead. Do you have rules for your own writing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always less is more. To the point where I know that sometimes I actually can look like I'm being kind of curt, but that's people that I work with regularly know that is how I communicate. I have routinely sent emails to people where they'll send me like 8 or 9 paragraphs, and I'll respond with no, or yes, or something. It's like there's no benefit to me or them to spending extra time reading it. And the thing is, it's not that like you don't want to lose the ability to write, obviously, but you have to think like for whose benefit are you writing all that information?
Yeah, I think a lot of times I'm just basically processing my thoughts and it comes out in the writing, but it actually makes it more fuzzy. All right, well, we only have 3 minutes, so there's one question I ask everybody I want to get your answer to real quick before we jump off, which is, to you, what does it mean to be human / superhuman, if there's a difference between those two things?
So that's a great question. So I'm a big believer in the philosophy of Kaizen, the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, which is, are you familiar?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for those who aren't, it's the idea of continual small improvement for the good. And I believe, so I'm not really big into like large goal setting. Granted, right now I'm going against that rule because I want to become mayor, but still, everything along the way is sort of these small incremental changes. And I believe that if we continue to do that every day in every way, I'm a little bit better than I was yesterday, then that to me feels a little bit more superhuman than just human.
So what does it mean to be human? I know that's a big question for 1 minute, but
as opposed to superhuman?
Just as opposed to anything else.
So I'll tell you, my favorite quote of all time ever is from Robert Heinlein, a human being. Where is it? It's not that long. It's here we go. A human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. That's what being a human means to me. Doing all the things.
Well said. All right. Well, we are at our time. Ari, if people want to find you, where should they go?
Everything about me is at lessdoing.com. And arimeisel.com is the same thing. But anybody is always welcome to get in touch with me on Voxer. You can go to Vox. Actually, now you can go to thevoxzilla.com. As of yesterday, a client called me that yesterday, and I had to get that domain name. But it takes to do a YouTube video that sort of explains how to get in touch. And I really do welcome it. You're welcome to get in touch with me.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.